I never thought I'd tell this story, but after 14 years of silence, I'm ready to uncover the past. A past my mother wanted buried forever. If you think tragedies only happen in movies, then listen to me. Because sometimes, the cruelest things don't come from enemies, but from the very person who gave you life. And it all started the summer I turned 12. The summer that turned me invisible in my own home. My name is Sophia Reynolds, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. Before 2011, my family was ordinary. My parents and I lived in a small turquoise house on the corner of 42nd Street. My father, Matthew, was a civil engineer, stern but always knew how to make me laugh. My mom, Diane, was a freelance accountant who stayed home more often. Every morning, Dad would drive me to school, while Mom made dinner. There was always creamy mushroom soup, my favorite. We weren't rich, but we had enough. I had books to read, my own bike, and parents who listened. On winter nights, we'd wrap ourselves in blankets and watch old movies, with Dad laughing loudly and mimicking actors until I rolled on the floor. Mom would give me a playful glare, then hand me another piece of cake. That was the peaceful time I still dream of. Before everything shattered, like a mirror thrown against a wall. It was a Wednesday, I remember clearly. Dad left the house earlier than usual because he had to drive to a new construction site in the southern suburbs. I stood at the door, waving goodbye, and he winked. "I'll take you to the river this afternoon just like I promised." I didn't know that would be the last time I saw that look in his eyes. Around 4 o'clock the landline rang. My mother answered and her face turned pale in seconds. She collapsed into the chair, still holding the phone, stammering, "No. No way. Matt? No, it can't be." I stood frozen, my heart pounding. When she hung up, she looked at me with empty eyes. "Your father, there was an accident. His car flipped at the bend. He's gone, Sophia." I thought she would pull me into a hug, but she didn't. She just sat there like a stone statue, and I, a 12-year-old girl, had to bury the scream inside my own chest. The following weeks were hell. The funeral was quiet. No one said much. Friends came and went. But my mom changed completely. She stopped cooking, never asked about school, didn't even look me in the eyes. At first I thought she was grieving, but then I realized she wasn't broken. She was escaping something, and it had nothing to do with my dad. 3 months after the funeral, Mom started getting phone calls in the evenings. I'd walk past her room and see the phone light blinking and hear her soft laughter. One time, I peeked through the door, and she quickly turned off the screen. "You knock before entering." "Sorry, who are you talking to?" "It's none of your business, Sophia." A week later, I walked into the kitchen and saw her wearing earrings and lipstick, things she hadn't worn since Dad died. "Where are you going?" "Out to meet a friend." "What friend?" "Robert." I'd known him for a few weeks. That name, Robert, hit me like thunder on a sunny day. My mom, a widow for not even 4 months, was dating. I didn't say anything. I didn't know how. I just stood there, holding my glass of water, staring at the woman who once taught me that love was sacred, something to cherish, now, acting like it could be replaced overnight. 2 weeks later, she brought Robert home. He was tall, had slicked back hair, and a fake smile that gave me chills. But what scared me even more was his daughter. Lily, 6 years old, with golden hair tied in pink ribbons and big round eyes. Like a child straight out of a perfect Christmas card. "Sophia, this is Robert and Lily," Mom said, gripping my shoulder. "They'll be moving in with us." I took a step back. "What did you just say?" "Robert needs a fresh start. And Lily needs a good big sister." "But, what about Dad? It hasn't even been 6 months since the funeral." Mom frowned. Her voice went cold. "That's over, Sophia. You need to learn to accept it." "Accept it?" It felt like my world crumbled again, and this time, it wasn't because my dad died. It was because the only person I had left chose to abandon me when I needed her most. I used to think nothing could be worse than losing my dad. But I was wrong. Because being forgotten in your own home, that's what kills you. When Robert and Lily officially moved in, my mother changed completely. She was no longer the woman who held me during nightmares, or the one who left notes in my lunchbox saying, "You're my sunshine." She became a stranger. Overly sweet to Lily, doting on Robert like he was some treasure she stumbled upon. And me? I became an old item in the closet no one bothered to dust off. I wasn't allowed to watch movies with them anymore. "Lily needs peace to sleep early," Mom said, pushing me off the couch. Dinners, once warm family time, turned into Lily's performance hour. She'd tell silly stories, mispronounce words, and everyone laughed like it was the funniest joke of the century. I just stared at my plate, quietly eating. Every time I tried to speak, Robert would cut me off with a dagger-sharp glare. "Don't you see Lily's talking, Sophia? Don't interrupt." I'd look at my mom. She said nothing, just kept piling food on Lily's plate, smiling without a hint of warmth in her eyes. I began to be excluded from the smallest things. The bathroom I used was now for Lily, because she's still little. My personal items were dumped into a cardboard box and left in the hallway. My coat was squeezed into a closet once empty after Dad's passing, now filled with Robert's suits, hats, and leather shoes. I learned to stay quiet, because every time I spoke, I earned another invisible wound. Robert always found a reason to belittle me. One time I accidentally dropped a glass while clearing the table. He stood up, slammed his hand down so hard the plates shook. "Unbelievable, a kid your age can't even hold a glass? You think water glasses grow on trees?" I whispered an apology, hands trembling as I grabbed a towel. But he wasn't done. "You live in my house, eat my food, use my electricity, and this is how you repay me? Pathetic." I bit my lip so hard it bled. I knew if I talked back, he'd turn to my mom with the usual line. "Your daughter is so ungrateful." And as always, she'd nod. Or worse, stay silent. My very existence annoyed them. Then one day someone else entered our house. Eleanor, Robert's mother. A skinny woman with a face that looked like she smelled something rotten all the time. From the moment she saw me, she frowned. "This is the girl. Doesn't look like anything special. No wonder she's always causing problems." I froze in the hallway. She walked around me like she was inspecting damaged goods. Hair unbrushed, wrinkled shirt, hunched back. No wonder no one could ever love her. I wanted to scream at her, but instead, I clenched my fists until my nails broke the skin. From then on, Eleanor haunted the house. Once, while I was reading on the couch, she walked by and tapped my knee with her cane. "Sit like that and you'll ruin your spine. What kind of girl sits like a boy?" One time, she slapped me lightly across the face because I ate too slowly and ruined the mealtime rhythm. A small slap, but enough to leave a handprint. I told my mother. She looked at me, her eyes distant like she was listening to the morning news. "She's old now, Sophia. Don't make a big deal out of it. Can't you just let it go?" In that moment I understood one thing clearly. In my mother's eyes, I was no longer her daughter. I was just an obstacle. Lily, on the other hand, was praised like an angel. One of her messy drawings was stuck on the fridge, framed on the wall, even printed onto her birthday invitations. I turned in an exam and got an A. No one even asked. She spilled milk on the carpet and my mom laughed, saying, "She's just growing up." I spilled water, and Robert yelled like thunder, and my mom called a carpet cleaner within 5 minutes. Once, I accidentally broke Lily's favorite pencil. She cried like I had just killed her pet. "She's jealous of you," Robert said. "Of course," Eleanor chimed in, overshadowed by a smarter, prettier, better-behaved little sister. Classic bitter big sister. I lifted my head and looked straight at them. "I'm not jealous, I just wish someone would treat me like a human being." No one answered. My mom stood behind the table, drawing dishes, her hands trembling slightly, but she didn't turn around. That house used to be my home, now it was just a stage where I played the background role, no lines, no spotlight, just there so others could shine. I don't remember the exact moment I decided to become independent. Maybe it didn't come in one big realization. Maybe it was the build-up of every sharp glare from Robert, every mocking word from Eleanor, every time my mother walked past me like I was furniture. But one morning in March, on my 16th birthday, I looked in the mirror and saw a skinny girl with dark circles under her eyes. And I whispered to myself, "You can't live like this forever." That afternoon, while Robert drove Lily to art class, I quietly typed and printed flyers. Sophia. Dog walking, babysitting, odd jobs. Honest, punctual, loves animals. I walked around the neighborhood, house by house, door by door, knocking and smiling as hard as I could. Mrs. Mildred, the elderly widow at the end of the street, peeked through the door and asked, "You're the girl who got yelled at the other day for spilling water on the sidewalk, right?" I blushed and nodded. She flung the door open. "Good. People who admit mistakes are the ones who learn. My Max needs a walk every afternoon. $10 each time, deal." Max was an old chuppy dog, heavy as a boulder. But I loved him from the first walk. He didn't judge me for my worn-out clothes, or frown when I collapsed onto a bench out of breath. He just licked my hand and softly whined like he was saying, "You're okay." After Max, I got Pepper, the hyper little dog from the Martinez family. Then I was asked to babysit the Jenkins twins on Saturday nights. On weekends, I helped Mr. Benson, the blind elderly man, organize his closet and read his letters. I did everything, I turned nothing down. At night, while Robert's family watched movies and laughed loudly, I sat in my room, counting cash and writing notes in my old blue notebook. I saved every cent. No snacks, no new clothes, no birthday parties, just one goal: to buy a phone. One of my own. Truly, mine. 3 months later, I had $187. Just enough to buy a discounted older model phone at Best Buy. I walked to the store, heart floating. When I held it in my hands, I couldn't stop smiling. That night, I sat on my bed, plugged it in, downloaded study apps, set alarms. Every beep from the phone felt like confirmation. I had done it. No one could call me a freeloader anymore. I was setting the ringtone when Lily barged in, like always, without knocking. "What's that?" Her eyes widened. "My new phone," I said, trying to stay calm. "I want it." I gave a cold smile. "No, I bought it with money I earned." She ran downstairs screaming like she'd just been attacked. "Dad, Sophia has a new phone, I want it too." I had barely stepped out of my room when Robert stormed up the stairs, eyes blazing red. "Who do you think you are, buying stuff without asking?" "I used money I earned." "What money? You live under my roof, use my electricity, eat my food. You don't own anything here." Before I could react, he ripped the phone from my hands and turned to Lily, voice suddenly sweet. "Here you go, princess." I stood frozen. "That was mine," my voice cracked. Robert turned back, face inches from mine. "I just told you, nothing here is yours. You're just extra baggage." My mom stood on the stairs, arms crossed, witnessing it all. Not a word. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't have any tears left. The next morning at school, my English teacher, S. Harper, saw me slumped over my desk in the back. "Sophia, are you okay?" I meant to shake my head, but my lips spoke first. "They took my phone. I bought it with money I earned, but they don't think I deserve it." She sat beside me. "Who's they, Sophia?" And I told her everything. For the first time in years, I told everything. About my dad, about Robert, about Lily, about my mom, about the slaps, the insults, and the phone stolen right out of my hands. That afternoon, I was called to the principal's office. And my mom was called in too. I wasn't in the room during their talk, but when my mother came out, her face was tight as a wire. She handed me the phone, without a word, and walked away before I could even react. That night, Lily cried for an hour about losing her phone. My mother banged on my door, voice low and bitter. Proud of yourself? Humiliating the whole family over a cheap toy, you really are a traitor. I lay on the bed, holding the phone. Feeling no joy. Only ashes. The tiny bit of happiness I had tried to build was once again crushed by the very people who were supposed to protect me. But in that moment, I knew I had to get out. Not because of a phone, but because I deserved a life of my own. I remember the day I received the scholarship letter so clearly. It was raining, and I had just run home from my part-time job. Soaked to the bone, mud splattered up the cuffs of my jeans. A thick envelope sat in the mailbox, bearing the official seal of St. Helena University. I ran up to my room, heart pounding like a drum. My hands shook so badly it took me a few minutes just to open it, and when I read the words, "We are pleased to inform you that you have been awarded a full scholarship," I broke down crying, not out of surprise, but because for the first time in years, I was certain I would be free of this place. That night, I waited until everyone was gathered at the dinner table. Dinner was Lily's favorite, baked pasta. Mom had even lit candles like it was a special occasion. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "I have some good news to share." Robert put down his knife, looking up with an annoyed expression. "What now?" "I got accepted into St. Helena University, with a full scholarship." No one said anything for a few seconds. Then Lily burst into laughter like I had just told a bad joke. Robert scoffed. "You applied to college without asking me?" "I did everything on my own. Mom knew I applied. I'm not asking anyone for money. The scholarship covers tuition and housing." "And you think you can just leave this house like some ungrateful brat?" I swallowed hard. "I'm not running away. This is a life-changing opportunity. I just want—" "You want what? You live in my house, eat my food, and you think you have a right to decide anything?" His voice was so loud that Lily flinched and knocked over her water glass. I looked to my mother, hoping she would say something. Next to her, a piece of bread sat crushed in her hand, her eyes fixed on her plate. "Mom," I whispered. She looked up, her gaze cold as ice. "You've never respected this family. You're always trying to ruin our lives." "Family?" I nearly screamed. "I get called a freeloader every day. I get everything I've worked for taken away. I've done everything just to survive here. And now that I have a real chance, you—" Smack. The sound echoed like a gunshot. My cheek burned. My mother's hand was still raised. Lily's mouth was wide open. Robert laughed. Like he'd just watched the best scene in a movie. "You dare raise your voice at your mother? Fine, Sophia, get out of my house. Right now." I froze. "What? You heard me," my mom hissed, her voice like a snake. "Take your things and leave." I stood up, my cheek burning, my heart crushed. I ran to my room, threw my backpack on the bed and shoved in a few sets of clothes, my notebook, school documents, and the phone I had fought so hard to keep. I didn't have time to think. Just the urge to leave immediately. As I came down the stairs, Lily was coloring like nothing happened. Robert flipped on the TV like he had just completed a chore. "And my mom?" She stared at the screen without even glancing in my direction. I opened the door. The night wind hit my face, carrying the chill of a spring that hadn't quite arrived. I stood there for a few seconds, hand clenched around my backpack strap. No one saw me off. No one called me back. I stepped out and closed the door behind me, with all the pieces of my heart I had left. I didn't know where I was going. Everything blurred under the streetlights. My legs kept walking, my eyes kept watering. I had no close relatives, no best friend to turn to. But then I remembered Maya, my lab partner in biology. The one who once lent me her book when I forgot mine. The only person at school who ever asked, "Are you okay?" and actually waited for an answer. I followed the address Maya had written on a study group flyer. My eyes were swollen, my throat dry as I rang the doorbell around 10 o'clock at night. The door swung open. "Sophia?" Maya looked shocked. "What? What happened?" I couldn't answer. I just sobbed. I don't have anywhere to go. Maya pulled me inside without asking another question. She brought me to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and called her aunt. Miss Serena. Miss Serena was a woman with brown skin, tight cornrow braids, and eyes sharp enough to read your thoughts. When Maya whispered what happened, she simply said, "You need a place to stay, right? There's space above the garage. It's got a bed, a bathroom, and the kitchen still has some cold pizza." I stood frozen. Really? I don't joke about helping people, sweetheart. That night, I slept in the tiny loft above the garage. The bed was a bit saggy, the smell of fresh paint still lingered, and a chubby cat snoozed at my feet. But I had never felt safer. The next morning, when I woke up, my phone buzzed with a message. An unknown number. I opened it. "Mom, come home now, stop being dramatic." I turned off my phone. There was no home anymore. I never imagined a small Italian restaurant on the corner of Franklin Street could save my life. But somehow, it did what my mother never could. It saw me. 3 days after I moved into Aunt Serena's loft, I still didn't know how I'd survive. Each morning I woke up staring at the ceiling dotted with old paint stains and wondered, am I strong enough to keep going? I still went to school, tried to act normal, but every night I curled up with fear gnawing at me. Tuition, living expenses, the future. That evening after school, I sat silently in the kitchen, staring into a glass of water. Aunt Serena walked in, her hair smelling of fabric softener, carrying a paper bag and 2 plates of steaming spaghetti. She set one down in front of me, then put her hands on her hips. "Hungry?" I nodded. But I still stayed quiet. Aunt looked at me for a moment, then sighed. "Maya told me everything, about your mother, that man, all of it. You don't have to repeat it." She poured more water. "But listen, Sophia, life is a fight. You've already fought. Now it's time to learn how to stand on your own." I gave a sad smile. "I want to, I just don't know where to start. I have no money and college is coming up." She nodded. "I have a friend. Her name's Clarissa, she manages an Italian restaurant downtown. They're looking for help. I can put in a word. It's not easy work, but if you're willing, that place could be your start." I nearly jumped up. "I'm ready. I'll do anything, as long as I can stand on my own 2 feet." On Saturday morning, Aunt took me to a restaurant called La Fiora. A cozy red brick building with a hand-carved wooden sign, like a little corner of Europe in the middle of Oregon. The smell of garlic butter and tomato sauce hugged my nose the moment I stepped inside. Clarissa, a petite woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, stepped out of the kitchen, still wearing a flour-dusted apron. "You're Sophia?" "Yes, ma'am." "Serena says you're a hard worker." "Good. We don't have space for lazy people. Clear tables, wipe counters. Learn how to carry a tray. Do well, and maybe there's an apprenticeship in it for you. Do poorly, and don't come back tomorrow." I nodded so hard it nearly hurt my neck. My first shift started that afternoon. I wiped tables, washed glasses, took orders, and nearly messed everything up. I spilled water into a guest's shoe, delivered the wrong dish to the wrong table, and dropped a tray once. But Clarissa didn't fire me. She just frowned, patted my shoulder, and said, "Next time hold the tray with your left hand. Better balance. And don't run. You slip, you're done." After the shift, I collapsed on the steps behind the kitchen, my back soaked in sweat, legs completely numb. Clarissa handed me a lemonade and sat beside me, sighing. "The first day is always hell. But if you're still sitting here instead of running away, it means you've got guts. And you'll need guts in this business." I laughed for the first time in weeks, a small laugh but a real one. A week later, Clarissa called me upstairs, to the 2nd floor where there was a small attic apartment. The previous owner used to live here. It's empty now, not spacious, but there's a bed, a small kitchen and a window that overlooks the street. If you need a place, Serena's on board. I could barely believe my ears. I can really stay here? As long as you show up on time and don't turn it into a pigsty." I thanked her over and over. When I stepped into that little space, with its sloped ceiling, bare brick walls and small square window, I felt like I had entered a new world. This was my space. No one to yell at me through a door, no one to snatch things from my hands. Just me, the light, and the soft hum of traffic below. The months that followed passed like pages of an unfinished book. I learned everything from Clarissa: how to check inventory, manage schedules, track reservations, work with suppliers. I took notes, learned every task like a child learning to speak. Clarissa was strict but fair. When I did well, she gave a small nod. When I messed up, she made me fix it immediately. No shouting, no humiliation. And most importantly, she believed in me. Aunt Serena visited regularly, bringing food or asking about school. Maya, somehow, became my best friend. We studied together, worked side by side, and laughed about everything. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I haven't forgotten what my mother and Robert did, but I no longer let it consume me every night. I was busy. Busy living, busy learning, busy building something they could never take from me. My own future. There's a strange feeling that comes with walking into a restaurant where you once wiped tables, then sitting in the manager's office, looking at a fully booked reservation list, and knowing your fingerprint is on every brick. I, Sophia Reynolds, 24 years old, am now the co-owner of the La Fiora restaurant chain, alongside Maya, the friend who once opened her kitchen door to me on a rainy night. From a nervous server, I now sign off on employee paychecks, negotiate with wine suppliers, and approve special menus for private events worth thousands of dollars. The journey here wasn't easy. But there's nothing I'd change. After living in the attic for 3 years of college, I graduated with a degree in hospitality business management. There was no party, no family applause, but I wore an old cap and gown and stood in the school courtyard with Maya, who was studying menu and food photography design. We laughed together, no fireworks, no cameras, just a shared look that said, "We're going to build something big." And we did. Clarissa, my blunt, no-nonsense mentor in the restaurant world, announced her retirement after 25 years running La Fiora. That day, she called us up to the office and pulled a stack of papers from her drawer. "What would you two think about running this place together?" she said, eyes never leaving the contract. I looked at Maya, then back at Clarissa. We'd have to double our effort. Then double it, but do it right. We bought Clarissa's shares using all of my savings, plus a small loan from a support fund for young women entrepreneurs. Maya handled brand and visual design, from tablecloth colors to the food photography concepts. I handled operations, systems, hiring, accounting, and customer complaints about dishes that didn't taste like last year. After 6 months, revenue increased by 1.5 times. We opened a second location in a busy corner of Beaverton, then a third in Salem, and recently a fourth in the art district of Eugene, where young crowds flock every weekend to experience our modern twist on Italian cuisine. Each location carries its own vibe, but all keep La Fiora's soul: honest, heartfelt, and unpretentious. No silk tablecloths or crystal glasses, just pasta, made with real love, and staff who know regulars by name. I remember once, a businesswoman from California dined with us. I was clearing dishes myself to help the team when she asked, "Are you the manager here?" I replied, "Not just the manager, I'm also the owner." She nodded slowly, smiling. "I could tell from the way you walked into the kitchen, from how you looked at your staff. This isn't just a restaurant. This is your child." I smiled. I didn't deny it. We didn't just expand the space, we spread our values. Maya leads a mentoring program for culinary students. I provide in-house training for young employees who want to grow in the industry. We take interns from local schools and host workshops for aspiring young chefs. And at every location I've set aside a small corner, with a photo of Clarissa and the words, "The first person who taught me to believe in myself." I'll never forget the one who gave me a second chance. One Monday morning, while I was reviewing shipment schedules, Maya walked into the office, holding a copy of Northwest Culinary Voice, a leading culinary magazine in the Pacific Northwest. Guess who just made it into the top 10 fastest-growing independent restaurant chains? I raised an eyebrow. Please don't say La Fiora, because my heart won't be able to take it. Maya flashed a radiant smile. La, fi, oh, ra. I sat in stunned silence. Just for a second. Then stood up and grabbed her hand. We did it! And we're just getting started. We used to fall asleep on our laptops after messing up payroll. We once cried together in the walk-in freezer after a supplier canceled a delivery last minute. But every time I saw a customer walk in, smile, and say their favorite dish still tasted just right, I knew it was all worth it. I didn't need to be honored anywhere. I didn't need applause or admiration. I just needed to walk into my restaurant, hear the clinking of silverware, smell the rich aroma of sauces, and know in my heart, I got here on my own 2 feet. No one gave me this life. I claimed it. Some moments, thought long buried by time, suddenly surface like a cold blade slicing through healed skin. For me, that moment came on a Saturday evening at our downtown Portland La Fiora location. I was heading downstairs to the private event room, wearing my usual professional smile and holding the printed special menu. The engagement party had been booked 3 weeks in advance via email. No familiar names, no red flags. All I knew was there would be 48 guests, a cozy atmosphere with candlelight, and a 3-tier tiramisu cake. The restaurant was bustling. Glass chandeliers reflected light into wine glasses, the gentle clinks of spoons against porcelain forming a soft symphony. Sophia, they're here, Maya said as she stepped into the office, her expression strange. You might want to come down and see for yourself. I frowned. Is there a problem? You'll understand when you get there. I slipped on my black blazer with the La Fiora badge pinned on the chest, a symbol of my role, co-founder. I took a deep breath as I descended the wooden staircase, just as I had done countless times before. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw in that banquet room. My mother, Robert, and Sarah. I froze, blood rushing to my face. There was no mistaking them. My mom still had the same hairstyle, soft blonde curls, cream cashmere sweater. Robert looked heavier, his receding hairline even more pronounced. Sarah wore a glittery dress, her hand flashing with a sparkling engagement ring. Beside her stood a young man in an Armani suit. Sarah's engagement party. My mother had just raised her glass when her eyes landed on me. I wasn't sure she recognized me right away. But when her gaze dropped to the name badge, Sophia, manager, La Fiora, she stiffened. And then, she laughed. A mocking laugh, loud enough to turn heads. Oh, look who it is, our little waitress. Sarah turned and recognized me immediately. She shrieked with laughter. Unbelievable, my sister, the one who ran away crying, is now serving food. I didn't say a word. I just stood tall, one hand gently resting on the menu folder. The room's attention began to shift toward me. Robert stood, wobbling as if he'd had too much to drink. Still waiting tables, huh? 10 years later and no progress. I bet you still don't know how to hold a glass properly. Sarah giggled, snuggling up to her fiancé. Let's hope she doesn't spill sauce on my wedding dress tonight. I clenched my teeth. Every cell in my body screamed to respond, to shout the truth. But before I could say anything, a clear, firm voice rose behind me. According to our service contract, any guest who insults or harms staff or management will be asked to leave immediately. I turned. Maya stood there, holding a leather-bound contract folder with La Fiora's gold-embossed logo. My mother scowled. And who are you to say that? Maya smiled, sharp as a blade. I'm the co-owner of this place. My mother froze. But I still hadn't spoken. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted them to hear it from me. I stepped forward. And I am Sophia Reynolds, co-founder of the La Fiora restaurant chain, currently with 4 locations across the state of Oregon, including the one you're standing in. The room fell silent. Somewhere, a spoon dropped onto a plate. Robert's face turned red, almost about to explode. Don't make things up, you're nothing but. I pulled out my phone, tapped a few times. A video started playing. Footage of me giving a speech at the grand opening of La Fiora's 4th location, shaking hands with the mayor. My face. My name. The words I had written myself. Sarah grabbed her fiancé's phone, frantically searching. Then, she stammered. On Google, it really is Sophia Reynolds. My mother's hand trembled, spilling her wine. She still wouldn't look at me. Her eyes locked onto the photo hanging on the wall. Me standing beside Clarissa. My mentor. With the words beneath. From invisible child to founder. Robert slammed his hand on the table. You think you're better than us? You're just a fatherless brat who got kicked out for being disrespectful. I looked at him, my gaze steady, no longer afraid. No, Robert, I was thrown out for daring to live honestly, for standing up after being trampled, and now I stand here as the owner. Your guests. And you just insulted a staff member, who also happens to be a co-owner. So... I turned to the staff. Please clear this table, this engagement party is over. The room erupted in murmurs. Guests whispered, Sarah cried, Robert shouted in protest. My mother sat frozen like stone. But me? I felt at peace. Because after all these years, I finally had the right to say, I'm no longer the shadow in your house, I am my own person. And I don't belong to you anymore. Robert stood, his face flushed with rage, or shame, I couldn't tell. He stumbled, holding a wine glass, then suddenly grabbed a salad plate and hurled it at me. Everything happened in a flash. A sharp pain across my left cheek. I felt dressing on my skin, lettuce tangled in my hair. Gasps filled the room, phones quickly came out. I raised a hand to my face, tasting blood at the edge of my lip. No apology, no remorseful glance. Robert stood there, panting, screaming like a madman. I raised you for years and now you come back here to humiliate me? You think running a damn restaurant makes you special? You're still that pathetic little leech. Maya stepped in immediately, her eyes like steel. You've crossed the line, that was physical assault, and the restaurant has the entire incident on video. I turned to the security team. Lock all camera feeds, pull the last 30 minutes, send them to our internal server. Across the room, Sarah sobbed, covering her face like she was the victim. Her fiancé, now pale as a ghost, quietly pulled out his phone to call a cab. My mother sat still, her confused eyes scanning the room. When I looked at her, she still wouldn't meet my gaze, just like 10 years ago. But this time, I didn't beg her to speak. I stood tall, blood trickling lightly down the collar of my shirt. Please assist the guests at this table in leaving the restaurant. As stated in the contract, any disruptive or violent behavior results in immediate cancellation of the event, without refund. Another staff member stepped forward. Security is on the way, Miss Sophia. I nodded. Thank you. Everything that followed felt like a slow-motion reel. Robert was restrained by 2 security guards while Sarah screamed at our mother to do something. Eleanor, still alive and still as vicious as ever, clung to her pasta plate. Like it was treasure. Screeching. You lunatic, you have no right to kick me out of my granddaughter's party. A server tried to gently take the plate and she shrieked. Thief. You're robbing me? He hit me, call the police. Already done, ma'am, Maya replied calmly, her voice steady. Some guests started recording. One captured Robert being escorted out of the restaurant, still cursing through slurred speech. Another filmed Sarah collapsing into a chair, clutching her head, mascara smeared like something out of a horror film. 30 minutes later, the police arrived. I stood silently as one of the officers asked, Who's the victim here? I raised my hand. Me, Sophia Reynolds, co-owner of this establishment. That man threw a plate at my face. There is video footage and multiple witnesses. Robert was handcuffed and taken away, still shouting drunken insults. Sarah tried to follow but was stopped at the door. None of them, not a single one, looked back at me. The next morning my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First, Maya sent over the security footage, high quality, full audio, capturing the entire exchange, the assault, and my response. Then came a wave of videos from guests, uploaded to TikTok, Facebook, and Reddit. Within 12 hours, the hashtags "engagement gone wrong" and "pasta salt" were trending across Portland. A clip of Eleanor screaming about her pasta plate went viral as a meme, "When your dignity is pasta-shaped." I opened my email, hundreds of messages from strangers. One read, "I was abused by my stepmother too, thank you for standing up. You're an inspiration." I've never dared speak back before. But now I'm rethinking everything. On professional forums, I was being praised as a resilient woman and a composed leader in the face of public provocation. Meanwhile, my former family unraveled. Robert was suspended from his job for behavior unbecoming of a company representative. Sarah lost her wedding venue contract. The venue wanted nothing to do with a publicly violent event. My mother said nothing. No comments. No message. No apology. I kept the video public. Not for revenge, but as a reminder to myself of the person I used to be and the woman I've become. I'm no longer the girl they called a freeloader. I am Sophia Reynolds. I rose from the insults, the blood on my cheek, and the shattered salad plate at my feet. I don't need their forgiveness. I just need freedom from them. Sophia's story is a testament to the strength of resilience and self-respect. Hurt, dismissed, and abandoned by her own family, she did not collapse, she rose. She built success with nothing but grit and purpose. Despite being trampled, Sophia didn't fight back with hatred, but with maturity, courage, and self-worth. She proved that sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't a comeback line, it's a life so brilliant, they never even imagined it. What do you think of Sophia's decision? Should she ever forgive her family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories about family, courage, and redemption. Why? Why did it have to be me? My mother's cold voice echoed through the heavy atmosphere in the living room, like a blade slicing through the air. Her eyes locked onto my belly, as if it were an unforgivable disgrace. I, Sophia, 24 years old, pregnant with my first child, only wished for a small word of congratulations from her. Instead, the nightmare began. If I hadn't stepped through that door that day, maybe everything would have been different. Maybe I wouldn't have witnessed firsthand the twisted, brutal version of love my mother had given me all these years. That afternoon, Noah, my husband, and I drove nearly 2 hours from Denver to the small town of Grand Lake, where I was born and raised. The whole drive, my hand clutched the hem of my shirt tightly, heart full of hope. I foolishly believed that news of her first grandchild might make my mother look at me differently, might make her love me just once. As soon as we stepped into the house, my older sister, Allison, 3 years older than me, rushed over and hugged me tightly. "Sophia, it's been so long," she exclaimed, her lavender perfume faintly lingering in the air. I returned her hug, forcing down the anxiety bubbling in my chest. Mother stood at the kitchen doorway, her gaze slicing through me like a blade gliding across frozen water. "Oh, I didn't prepare anything for dinner," she said, with a voice both polite and icy, before turning back into the kitchen. No hug. No greeting. I heard her rummaging in the kitchen, and moments later she came out carrying a plate piled high with sugar-laden cookies. I forced a weak smile. Mother knew I didn't eat sweets. I had recently been diagnosed with mild gestational diabetes. But she still placed the plate right in front of me. Noah, with his usual tact, quickly broke the tense silence. "Oh, the cookies look delicious. To me, who I'm eating with matters more than what I'm eating." Mother merely nodded coldly, glancing at me briefly before sitting down opposite us. My heart pounded violently in my chest. This moment. It was time. I grabbed Noah's hand, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Mom, Allison, we came today to tell you something important." Mother narrowed her eyes, the forced smile slipping away. I gripped Noah's hand tighter, my throat dry. "I'm pregnant, Mom," My voice trembled slightly, but I still smiled, hoping for a miracle. Silence. A suffocating silence engulfed the room. Allison was the first to react, her blue eyes lighting up. "Oh my God, Sophia! Congratulations!" She rushed over and hugged me, patting my back with genuine happiness. "But Mother." She just sat there, her gaze shifting from me to my belly, then darkening ominously. I felt the air around me thicken. "Noah, I'll step outside to take a work call," Noah said softly, kissing my forehead before leaving. Allison quickly stood up too. "I'll make some tea." Leaving just me and Mother. I turned toward her, my heart pounding wildly. "Mom." The rage, long suppressed in her eyes, exploded. She shot to her feet, her eyes filled with hatred and contempt. "Why you?" she spat, her voice slicing through the air like an icy gust through a crack. Instinctively, I backed away, my hands protectively wrapping around my belly. The first grandchild should have been Allison's, not some useless trash like you. Before I could react, she suddenly raised her foot and kicked me hard in the stomach. The pain stabbed through me like thousands of knives piercing my flesh. I collapsed onto the floor, clutching my belly, gasping. "Mom, please, don't." The kitchen door slammed open, and Allison rushed in, still holding a cup of tea. "Mom, what are you doing?" The front door burst open too. Noah ran in, his face paling when he saw me writhing on the floor. "Sophia!" he shouted, scooping me into his arms, his face a mixture of fear and fury. Mother stood motionless, her face emotionless, coldly stating, "She just bumped into the table herself." Allison's hands shook as she clutched her phone tightly. "I'm calling an ambulance." The wail of the ambulance siren pierced the night, each beat hammering against my heart. I felt Noah's firm hand gripping mine tightly, while Allison sobbed against my shoulder. I knew, from that moment, nothing would ever be the same again. The ambulance tore through the night, red and blue lights flashing against my ghost-white face. Noah sat beside me, gripping my hand tightly, while Allison knelt next to the stretcher, tears streaming down her face. My blood felt like it was freezing inside me, each wave of dull pain twisting cruelly from my lower belly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mother's face. Cold, sharp as steel, burned into my mind like a brand. The vehicle jolted slightly over every turn. I heard the paramedic's reassuring voice. "We'll be at Memorial Hospital in a few minutes, hang in there, Miss Sophia." I nodded weakly, but inside my mind the memories surged back like a broken dam, flooding everything. I remembered, when I was 7 years old, that freezing Christmas with snow blanketing the path to our home. Under the twinkling Christmas tree, the presents were stacked high, bright red and gold ribbons shining. Allison, 10 at the time, squealed with delight as she tore open her gift and pulled out a sparkling, jewel-studded princess dress. Mother hugged her tightly, laughing loudly. "That's my girl. Radiant like a little fairy princess." I reached for my own tiny box, my hands trembling with hope. Inside was just a pair of thick gray socks, the kind sold at discount stores. I forced a weak smile, quietly hiding my gift behind my back, not daring to look up at Mother. "Sophia, those socks suit you," she said coolly. "Simple, fitting for someone as plain as you?" I clenched my small hands together tightly, telling myself socks were useful in winter. But deep down, the sting of being overlooked, of being deemed unworthy, carved a crack in my heart that would never fully heal. A sudden jolt pulled me back to reality. Beside my ear, the steady beeping of the heart monitor clicked rhythmically. Allison grabbed my cold hand and whispered, "Sophia, hang in there, please don't give up." I forced a weak smile, but inside it felt like my heart was being crushed. When I entered high school, the discrimination became even more obvious. Allison, with her golden hair and sparkling blue eyes, was chauffeured by Mother in a brand new SUV. And me? I had to ride an old bicycle, and whenever I asked Mother for permission to join extracurricular activities, she would sneer. "A waste of money. With your average grades, you're better off staying home." I once signed up for the track team, where I truly shined. I won first place in the district marathon during my sophomore year. I remember that day, standing on the award podium, scanning the crowd for Mother's face. But all I saw was an empty, cold space. She didn't come. She never did. Meanwhile, at every single one of Allison's cheerleading competitions, Mother showed up, loudly cheering, snapping photos non-stop. The ambulance stopped at the emergency room entrance. A team of doctors and nurses rushed over, pushing my stretcher inside, while Noah and Allison were asked to stay behind in the hallway. "Stay strong, Sophia," Noah shouted as the door slammed shut between us. I stared at the stark white ceiling, the pungent smell of antiseptic flooding my nose. In that moment, a memory from when I was 15 years old resurfaced. I was studying in the living room when Mother barged in, throwing my report card onto the table. "A C in math?" she sneered. "How shameful." I lowered my head, hands trembling with humiliation. Allison, meanwhile, only needed to get average grades to be rewarded with a beach vacation. "That's what a child who makes her mother proud deserves," Mother declared smugly. For the first time in my life, I asked myself, was I ever truly born to be loved? The nurse calling my name pulled me out of the memory. I was wheeled into the ultrasound room, a cold layer of gel spread across my belly. The screen flickered dimly. A female doctor turned toward me, smiling reassuringly. "The baby's heartbeat is still strong. We'll continue to monitor, but for now, everything looks stable." Tears welled up uncontrollably. Not from physical pain, but because after so many years, I finally felt that a part of me, this tiny life, was worthy of being protected. Unlike how I had once been rejected. When they wheeled me back into the hallway, Noah and Allison rushed over immediately. Allison hugged me, sobbing. Sophia, you're so strong." Noah sat down next to my bed, gently stroking my hair. "I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you again." I smiled weakly, yet with determination. Inside, an unspoken promise took root. I will never let my child endure the kind of toxic love I once knew. The white lights of the emergency room ceiling seemed to blaze brighter, burning away the darkness that had gripped my heart for so many years. My story was only just beginning. I still vividly remember the day I walked out of Grand Lake High School, clutching my diploma tightly, my heart heavy with bitterness. There were no cheers welcoming me, no family waving or shouting my name like they had done for Allison years ago. When I arrived home, Mother stood blocking the doorway, her eyes colder than a January wind. "A high school diploma? What's there to be proud of?" she sneered with contempt. "Soon enough you'll be back here mooching off me." I didn't respond. I simply walked silently into my room, packed a battered suitcase and a few cheap clothes, and quietly left the house that had imprisoned my childhood for 18 years. I rented a tiny room in the outskirts of Denver, where moldy gray walls and squeaky windows welcomed every gust of wind. No one was waiting. No red carpet rolled out. Only a simple truth remained. If I wanted to live, I had to save myself. During the day, I worked as a waitress at a small cafe downtown, lugging heavy trays and dragging my aching legs through 8-hour shifts. At night, I stayed up studying, teaching myself basic computer skills from free websites. There were nights when I broke down sobbing alone in that pitch-black room, my cries muffled by exhaustion and loneliness. But each time I remembered Mother's cold eyes on the day I left, I wiped my tears and whispered to myself, "Get up, you cannot fall." Almost a year later, fortune finally smiled on me. I found a job posting for an office trainee position at a small electronics company in downtown Denver. No college degree required, just hard work and dedication. Trembling, I submitted my application, daring not to hope too much. Yet a week later, I received the call, hired. On my first day stepping into the office building, I wore a simple business outfit borrowed from a roommate. I still remember how my legs trembled as I walked down the long hallway, the click-clack of my borrowed heels echoing against the polished floor. At the HR department, I was given a brief introduction before being led down to the work area, where I saw Noah for the first time. He stood by the printer, frowning at the jammed paper inside. When he saw me awkwardly standing there, he smiled warmly, his deep blue eyes gentle. "New here? This printer has it out for all the newbies." I laughed, a genuine laugh, rare amidst those tense, struggling days. Little did I know, that was the beginning of everything. In the days that followed, Noah would occasionally stop by my desk, patiently guiding me through each procedure. I learned quickly, wasn't afraid of hard work, and tried my best not to give anyone a reason to complain. But during the brief breaks, we started talking. Not just about work, but about life. About unfinished dreams. I had never told anyone about my distorted childhood. But with Noah, I felt a strange sense of safety. One autumn afternoon, as the sunlight turned the leaves outside golden, I told him everything. About the cold, distant mother. About the Christmases with no gifts. About the track meets where I returned home, alone. I looked at him, terrified that Noah would look at me with pity. The one thing I hated most. But Noah simply stayed silent, then gently placed his hand over mine. "You've come so far, Sophia, not because of anyone else. Because of you, you're stronger than you think." Hearing those words, after so many years, I broke down in tears. Not from pain, but from being truly understood. As time passed, we grew closer. Noah patiently waited for me to open up, never pushing, never judging. He took me to simple places, parks on Sunday afternoons, a small Mexican diner around the corner, outdoor movie nights. No fancy restaurants, no grand promises. Just the gentle look in his eyes, and I knew I had found where I truly belonged. One winter night, as light snow began to fall outside my apartment window, Noah pulled a small, simple ring from his coat pocket. He did not kneel. There was no long speech. He simply said, "Sophia, will you build a real family with me? No lies, no hurt?" I threw my arms around him, tears soaking his coat. "I say yes." Remembering those days, lying now on a hospital bed with Noah and Allison beside me, I squeezed my husband's hand tightly. Without those years standing on my own wounded feet, I would not have reached today. I would never again kneel before the ghosts of my past. I would live, not just for myself, but for the tiny life growing inside me. And I would do everything to make sure no one could ever steal the light from our lives. Our wedding took place on an early autumn afternoon when the leaves along Denver's winding streets began to turn golden. We didn't have a large budget for a lavish ceremony. But under a small garden lit with string lights and filled with genuine laughter from friends, it became the most beautiful day of my life. Noah's family, the Millers, welcomed me with open arms. My new mother-in-law Carol hugged me tightly right from the start. "From now on, you are my daughter. No need to be shy." Those words, seemingly simple, choked me up. I had never heard such words from my birth mother. My mother, Meredith, still attended the wedding, but her face was as cold as the snowcaps atop distant mountains. I vividly remember the moment she swept her eyes over the simple setting, then whispered into my ear as we posed for pictures. "Just a childish game, you'll fail soon enough." I stood frozen for a few seconds, a sharp searing pain slicing through my chest. But then, I tightened my grip on Noah's hand, lifted my head high, and let a victorious smile bloom. I had chosen this path. No matter how many thorns I had to walk through, I would not turn back. The days following our wedding passed in a peace I had never dared to dream of. Noah worked at his engineering company, and I started a new role as an administrative assistant at a different company, where even my smallest efforts were genuinely acknowledged. At night, we cooked together in our tiny kitchen. Warm dinners, with simple grilled meat. Laughter echoing through the cramped but love-filled apartment. I thought to myself, maybe, finally, I had found where I truly belonged. Then one cold March morning, as the spring wind still carried a bite, I saw 2 bright red lines on the pregnancy test. My heart raced, and tears spilled from my eyes uncontrollably. "Noah," I whispered, as he stepped out of the bathroom. He looked at me, at the test in my hand, and almost instantly lifted me into the air with a joyful shout. "We're gonna be parents, Sophia!" I buried my face into his shoulder, laughing through tears of happiness. The good news quickly spread through Noah's family. My in-laws brought over catalogs for cribs, baby clothes, and toys. They excitedly suggested baby names, and every dinner was filled with lively chatter about the future. I was enveloped in a love I had never once felt from my own blood relatives. And yet, deep inside, a small, stubborn voice whispered, "What about Mother?" Even though my mind screamed that I didn't need her anymore, my heart throbbed with a foolish, lingering hope. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe the first grandchild would finally melt the ice in her heart. One evening, sitting by the window, the city lights shimmering across our small apartment, I picked up my phone, my fingers hesitating over the screen. After much hesitation, I sent her a simple message. "Noah and I would like to visit you and Allison next week. We have good news to share." It was a short text, but my heart pounded as if it would explode. Half an hour of silence. Then finally, Mother replied, "Up to you." Just those 3 cold words. But somehow, I still smiled. Still clung to the desperate hope that at least, she agreed to meet. I didn't know that meeting would be the moment that completely shattered the fragile hope still lingering in my heart. I never imagined that in just a few short minutes, the woman who once carried me in her womb could strike a blow I would carry for the rest of my life. And that was also the moment I realized true family is not determined by blood, but by love, or the absence of it. As the ambulance siren faded down the hallway, the hospital room door burst open. "My father!" Mr. Henry rushed in, his business suit still dusted with dirt. Behind him, my mother, Mrs. Meredith, followed silently, her face showing no trace of remorse. Father rushed to the bedside, panic flooding his eyes. "Sophia, is this true? Your mother—" Mother cut him off with a mocking laugh. "Don't believe these unruly kids, she just bumped into the table herself." I struggled to sit up, a dull pain stabbing at my lower belly, every muscle feeling torn apart. Noah tightened his grip on my hand, his eyes locked onto Mother. Allison, who had never once confronted our mother, stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "I saw it, Mom. I clearly saw you kick Sophia in the stomach." The room seemed to freeze. Father turned to look at Mother, his shoulders shaking with fury. "Is it true, Meredith?" Mother crossed her arms, replying indifferently. "She deserved it. Someone like her isn't worthy of having the first grandchild." I heard Noah clench his jaw tightly. The air in the room grew so heavy it was almost impossible to breathe. The door swung open again. A woman in a hospital uniform walked in, a social worker. "I'm Rebecca Simmons, Family Support Services." She introduced herself, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "According to protocol, we must intervene immediately if there are signs of abuse toward a pregnant woman." Mother let out a shrill, mocking laugh. "Another false accusation, what a pathetic generation." Rebecca remained unfazed. She walked straight to my bedside, sat down, and asked calmly but firmly, "Sophia, can you tell us exactly what happened?" I looked at my mother. Her eyes were like 2 rusted blades stabbing straight into me, full of threat. But I would not stay silent anymore. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. Tonight, when I announced I was pregnant, Mother became furious. She stood up. I swallowed hard. And kicked me, straight in the stomach. The hospital room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Rebecca nodded, carefully taking notes, then gently asked, "Has this been the first time you were treated like this?" I gripped the bedsheet tightly. Old memories. Empty Christmases. Senseless slaps. Cruel insults. Crashed over me like a tsunami. "No," I answered, my voice barely a whisper. I have always been a thorn in my mother's side. And then I told my story. Piece by bitter piece, every small scar I had buried deep inside broke free into the light. I spoke of holidays when only Allison received expensive gifts, while I was handed cheap leftovers. I spoke of how mother humiliated me in front of friends, mocking me as a shadow next to Allison. I spoke of the glares, the cutting remarks, and the slaps that rained down when no one else was watching. Mother stood there, her face flushed with rage, but she couldn't stop me from speaking. Father buried his head in his hands, collapsing into a chair, his voice hoarse. Why didn't I see anything all these years? I turned to look at him, tears streaming down my face. Because she always hid it well, Dad. In front of you, in front of everyone else, she played the perfect mother. But when it was just me, I choked on my words. She became someone else. Allison gripped my hand tightly, her eyes brimming with guilt. I'm sorry, Sophia, I didn't see, I was so blind. Rebecca nodded slightly, her tone firm. With this testimony and the evidence, we will immediately request a restraining order. Murate! Mother screamed, losing all control. You'll all regret this. I raised you traitors and now you turn and bite the hand that fed you? Father stood up, his expression more terrifying than I had ever seen. You're the one who should regret, Meredith. You are no longer my wife. And you are certainly no longer Sophia's mother. He signaled for hospital security. Mother struggled and hurled curses, but eventually she was dragged out, leaving behind a chilling, empty silence. When the door finally closed, the entire hospital room was drowned in stillness. I sank back into the bed, utterly exhausted, yet lighter than I had ever felt. Rebecca smiled gently. You've done what so many others couldn't. You chose to protect yourself and your baby. Noah bent down and kissed my forehead. You don't have to endure anymore, Sophia. We're going to build the family you always deserved. I clutched his hand and whispered. I lost my old family, but I found a new one. The first rays of dawn streamed through the window, casting a soft glow on the wedding ring on my finger, sparkling like a sacred promise. My life would never again be strangled by darkness. 2 days after my mother was removed from the hospital, my father returned, clutching a thick stack of papers. His face was noticeably gaunter, his eyes heavy, but there was no longer any hesitation in them. He sat down on the chair next to my hospital bed, gathering all his composure before speaking. Sophie, I've filed for divorce. I froze, his words striking my heart like an electric shock. I thought I must have misheard. But Father nodded, slowly, firmly. I can't continue living with someone who would hurt our daughter like this. Never again. Allison, standing beside me, squeezed my hand tighter, as if trying to lend me strength. I looked at my father and saw tears silently rolling down his wrinkled cheeks. I had never seen him cry, not once in my entire life. I'm sorry, he choked out. I left you to endure too much alone. I reached out and took his rough hand. For the first time in my life, I felt there were no longer cold, unreachable walls between us. That the restraining order was officially issued within the week. My mother, Meredith, was banned from coming within 500 feet of me or the baby. Every time she tried to text or call, our family lawyer immediately intervened. She tried blaming, crying, even threatening. But all I felt when I looked at her endless messages was emptiness. No more anger, no more pain. Just one cold truth. She no longer had the power to hurt me ever again. Throughout the rest of my pregnancy, my father and Allison were almost always by my side. My father, the once distant, silent man, became an indispensable companion. He and Noah took me to every prenatal checkup, patiently waiting in the hallway, always with a lukewarm coffee in hand. Every time the doctor turned on the ultrasound and displayed the tiny figure growing inside me, I saw my father smile. I never thought I'd get a second chance, he whispered once, his eyes never leaving the screen. But thanks to you, Sophia, I get to start over. Those words were more precious to me than any apology. Allison changed too. She moved out of mother's house and rented a small apartment just 5 minutes drive from mine. She showed up almost daily, bringing cooked meals, tiny newborn outfits, and little stories that made me laugh. One afternoon, as we folded tiny clothes into a new dresser, Allison paused. She turned to me, her eyes filled with deep regret. "You endured too much, Sophia, and I left you alone in that house for far too long." I shook my head, tears welling in my eyes. "It's not your fault. We were all blinded by her." We hugged each other tightly, bathed in the golden glow of sunset. And for the first time, I truly felt I had a sister. A real family. Mother vanished from our lives. I heard rumors she had moved to another state to live with distant relatives. Good. That distance was like a protective wall around the future I was building. I no longer felt resentment. No longer craved an apology or acknowledgement. I had learned how to let go. And that alone had set me free. One evening in early June, Father invited me, Noah, and Allison to his new house for dinner. He had sold the old house, filled with painful memories, and bought a small home with a backyard shaded by maple trees. We sat together, under the warm glow of yellow lights, listening to the crickets chirp in the yard. Father raised his glass of lemonade, his voice deep and steady. "From today onward, we are a new family. No more lies, no more coldness. Only love and truth." I looked around, saw the proud glint in Noah's eyes, the gentle smile on Allison's face, and the sparkling warmth in my father's gaze. I placed my hand over my belly, where the tiny life inside was growing stronger every day. "A new life. A new hope," I whispered, almost like a vow to myself. "There will be no place for old wounds in my child's life. Only love and light." The first labor pains started at 3 o'clock in the morning, when Denver was still blanketed in heavy mist. I shot up from bed, one hand grabbing the dresser for support, the other cradling my belly, as the contractions hit like crashing waves. Noah woke instantly, springing upright in panic. "Sophia, it's time, isn't it?" I nodded, sweat pouring down my forehead. In less than 10 minutes, Noah had me in the car, speeding toward Memorial Hospital, the place tied to so many memories of both pain and hope. Allison and Father made it just in time before I was wheeled into the delivery room. They ran toward me, their faces so worried it almost made me laugh through the gut-wrenching pain. "You'll be fine," I managed to say, squeezing Noah's hand tightly, as another fierce contraction twisted through my body. The labor lasted more than 16 hours. Each wave of pain felt like it was tearing my body apart. Each tiny heartbeat on the monitor reminded me, hold on, for the baby. Noah never left my side for even a second. He wiped the sweat from my forehead, gripped my hand tightly and whispered, "You're so strong, Sophia. I'm so proud of you." Allison stayed in the delivery room with me, aloud as my support person. She sat behind me, rubbing my back gently each time I screamed in agony. My father, although not allowed inside, waited outside the hallway from dawn until late at night, his eyes bloodshot with worry. "Oh, more push, Sophia, come on," the doctor shouted. I summoned every ounce of strength, as if pouring my entire soul into that final push. And then, in that moment, the first cry of my daughter rang out, high and pure like a bell cutting through all the darkness. I burst into tears, my body utterly exhausted, but my heart overflowing with a feeling I had never known before. Pure love. The nurse wrapped her in a white cloth and gently placed her on my chest. "She's a healthy baby girl," the doctor smiled. "Mother and baby are both doing well." I looked at the tiny life lying in my arms, her little red face, her tiny fists clenched, as if grasping the whole world. "Becky," I whispered. "Welcome to this life." Noah held both of us close, tears streaming uncontrollably down his face. "Thank you. Thank you for bringing her into this world." When I was taken to the recovery room, Allison and my father practically rushed in immediately. My father, the man who had always hidden his emotions, knelt down by my bedside, pressing his forehead against Nikki's tiny hand, his tears dripping onto the hospital bed. "Hello, my little angel," he said in a hoarse voice. "I promise to protect you, just as I once failed to protect your mother." Allison stood beside me, her hand trembling as she gently brushed the sweat-soaked hair from my forehead. "You did it, Sophia. You really did it." I gave a weak smile, clutching Nikki tightly, as if letting go might cause her to vanish from this fragile world. In that moment, for the first time in my life, I understood what true family meant. It wasn't about blood. It wasn't about painful ties. It was about choice, it was about unconditional love. The days following the birth were filled with laughter and warmth in my hospital room. My mother-in-law, Carol, came every morning, bringing chicken soup, warm milk, and kind advice. My father-in-law cradled Nikki tirelessly, whispering nonsense stories into her ears, his face glowing like a child with a new toy. Allison stepped into the role of godmother, patiently learning how to change diapers, mix formula, and rock Nikki to sleep. My father spent every weekend sitting beside me, holding Nikki, telling her the stories from his youth he had never shared with me before. Our tiny hospital room had never been so full of love. The day I was discharged, the whole family gathered outside to bring Nikki and me home. The early summer sun poured onto the sidewalk, creating dappled patches of light like a painting of new hope. Noah pushed Nikki's stroller ahead, Allison juggled a diaper bag, and my father carefully double-checked every safety strap on the infant car seat. I stood on the hospital steps, arms around my belly, watching the scene with a lump in my throat. I had lost a mother, but I had gained a true family, where love didn't have to be begged for or bartered. I promised myself, no matter how deep the scars of the past, my daughter would grow up in a home filled with love. No one, no matter how shadowy, would ever take that from us. I placed my hand over my heart, feeling it beating fiercely, and whispered, "Nikki, welcome to a home built on love." Our story was only just beginning. The first months raising Nikki were a blur of sleepless nights, endless crying, and tight, aching hugs. I lost count of how many times I woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, eyes burning from exhaustion, awkwardly pacing the room with Nikki in my arms. But even in the most tiring moments, just seeing that tiny face nestling against my chest melted my heart completely. No one had ever told me that motherhood could be so hard. Nor had they told me it could be so breathtakingly beautiful. I made a vow to do everything differently. No yelling without reason. No condescending stares that would kill her confidence. Never would Nikki have to wonder whether she deserved to be loved. Every time Nikki flailed her tiny arms and legs, I would whisper, "I'm here, sweetheart. I love you, unconditionally." No matter how tired I was, no matter how overwhelmed, I would make sure not a single day passed without Nikki feeling that love. When Nikki turned 3 months old, I joined a support group for young mothers in the area. On the first meeting, I walked into the room with a heavy heart full of anxiety. I feared judgmental stares. I feared being condemned for my past. But when I looked around at the other women, each with her own story, her own scars, I realized I was not alone. We sat in a circle, holding our babies, sharing our fears, our dreams, and our small everyday failures. Some had survived domestic abuse. Some had been abandoned by their families. But all of us had one thing in common. We were fighting, not just for ourselves, but for the tiny lives depending on us to create a kinder world. One day, during a meeting, the group facilitator asked everyone to share a promise they wanted to make to their child. When it was my turn, I cradled Nikki in my arms, took a deep breath, and spoke. "My daughter, I promise to always believe in you. Even if the world turns its back on you, I will stand by your side. I will be a home, not a prison. I will love you. Without conditions, without proof." The whole room fell silent. A few mothers quietly wiped their tears. I knew in that moment that the dark past had truly been left behind. I had chosen a new path. And I would walk it to the end. Each day, I learned more from Nikki. Her innocent curiosity. The way she reached out to the world with all her pure trust. Nikki's giggles lit up our small apartment like sunshine. My father, now retired, visited us every weekend. He would hold Nikki, tell silly stories, sometimes simply sit quietly, watching her play. In those moments, I saw in his eyes a silent regret, but also a pride he had never been able to show me before. Allison visited often too, bringing quirky little gifts or handmade items for Nikki. We never mentioned Meredith, the old mother who now existed only as a distant shadow. No one needed to say it aloud, but we all understood. An old chapter had closed, and we were writing a new one together. The following spring, when Nikki started crawling, I took her to the park near our home. I sat on a wooden bench, watching Nikki crawl across the lush green grass, her round face turned up toward the clear blue sky, her eyes shining like stars. I hugged myself and whispered, "You will grow up without having to fight to be loved. You will know that you are worthy. And I will always be here, always." A soft breeze blew through, scattering cherry blossom petals around Nikki, like a blessing from the earth itself. Letting my breath blend with the peaceful rhythm of the afternoon. No more anger. No more fear. Only hope. Hope for a future, no longer haunted by the ghosts of the past, but illuminated by the pure light of love. And I knew for certain we would be okay. Because I was the one guiding our story now, not anyone else. From a child who grew up amid coldness and favoritism, Sophia had bravely stepped out of the darkness to build a life filled with love. Through extraordinary strength, she not only protected herself, but also created a new home for her daughter, where love was a given, not a reward to be earned. Sophia's story reminds us, the past may hurt, but it is our choices today that shape the future. And Sophia chose love. Chose the light. What do you think about Sophia's journey and her determination to build a family filled with love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel to continue reading more heartfelt stories about family life. My name is Anna. I'm 37 years old, and for nearly 20 years I lived as if kindness was an obligation, not a choice. My family lived in a quiet suburb on the southern edge of St. Paul, Minnesota, where the houses had weathered wooden roofs and winters always overstayed their welcome. I was the eldest child. My younger brother Brian was 4 years younger, but he never really had to grow up. My father, Donald, worked as a truck driver for a frozen meat distribution company. Every day he woke up at 4:30 a.m., left before the sun rose, and came home after dark. His back ached so much that he often had to bend forward just to get out of the truck, but he never missed a shift. Not even in the harshest winter. My mother, Karen, worked part-time as a receptionist at a small health center, but her chronic migraines kept her home so frequently that her job eventually became more of a conversation filler than a real source of income. Since elementary school, I learned that staying quiet at the right time could save a dinner from turning into a battlefield. When my dad got angry because Mom forgot his pain meds, I'd pour him a glass of orange juice and ask about the weather at the loading dock. When Mom cried because she couldn't remember her online banking password, I'd sit beside her for hours, guessing every familiar combination until we finally got in. Brian was different. He had that something that made adults go soft. He could spill milk all over the freshly cleaned rug and still end up in Mom's arms. He could skip a math test because he felt anxious, and still get a new video game from Dad as a reward for trying. I always had to handle things on my own. When I had a 102-degree fever on a winter night, Mom handed me a Tylenol and said, "You're not a baby, don't make a big deal out of it." Growing up in an environment like that, I developed a special skill. Keeping things from falling apart. I was the one who cleaned the kitchen after my parents argued, the one who tutored Brian when his grades dropped, the one who shoveled snow and cut grass when Dad was sore and Mom couldn't sleep. Teachers adored me, because I was never late. always turned in assignments on time, and had never once been written up for breaking a rule. They called me a model student. To me, I felt like a machine programmed to obey. I started earning money when I was 16. That summer, my dad's hours were cut due to company downsizing. Mom had just come off a month-long migraine episode. No one asked me to do anything, but I walked into the local coffee shop and got a night shift. I made drinks, mopped floors after school. I still remember Mom's face when I handed her my first paycheck in a paper envelope. Her eyes sparkled, but her fingers clutched the check like she was afraid I'd take it back. "Anna, you don't have to do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I want to help," I told her, and I meant it. "Because we're family." From that moment, I never stopped. Nobody asked, but everyone quietly expected. And so, the responsibilities piled on, day by day, month by month, and I truly believed that was the only way I knew how to love. I entered senior year of high school carrying two roles, honor student, and the silent backbone of my family. After classes at West Haven High, I'd run straight to Flannery's Bakery for the evening shift, scrubbing floors, bagging loaves and scrubbing pans crusted with burned flour. Every 2 weeks, I brought home my paycheck and placed it neatly on the kitchen counter next to the mail bin. My mother never asked where it came from, but she never refused it either. Some nights, she'd whisper, "Thank you, sweetheart. God bless you," before slipping the envelope into her purse, like she was afraid she might change her mind. I chose to attend community college in Bloomington, just a 30-minute drive from home. People called it smart and practical. The truth was, I didn't dare go far. Every time I considered moving into a dorm, Mom's voice would soften. "If you're not here, who's going to take me to my eye appointment next week?" Dad would add, "Your mom's car can't handle long trips, Anna. You're better off nearby." I studied marketing and worked as a TA in microeconomics to qualify for a partial scholarship. Days were for classes. Evenings, I waitressed at an Italian restaurant. Weekends, I transcribed legal notes for a retired lawyer in town. Some months, I sent home close to $700. Just enough to keep the living room lights on, and the fridge stocked with something besides ice cubes. When Brian got into college in Madison, my parents threw a party like he'd won a full-ride scholarship, even though I'd secretly been covering most of his tuition. "He's smart like his sister," Dad said that night, raising his wine glass as if to toast someone who wasn't even in the room. I smiled and said nothing. If I spoke, it would ruin the mood. When I graduated, there was no party, no balloons, no words of congratulations. I stood outside the auditorium in my cap and gown, watching friends take pictures with their families. I texted Mom, "I'm done. I'll be home soon to make dinner." My first job was at a media agency in downtown Minneapolis. The starting salary was decent, enough to rent a small apartment if I wanted, but I didn't. My parents had just replaced the roof after an April storm, taking on more than $8,000 in debt. They said they'd pay it off gradually, but I knew it wouldn't happen unless I stepped in. So I stayed. To save money, I told my coworkers when I turned down the chance to split rent. The truth? I paid off that debt in the first 6 months of work. A few years later, I got promoted. The company gave me a small bonus. I used it to buy Mom a neck massager to help with her chronic migraines, and got Brian a new laptop because the old one can't handle my design software. I still hadn't upgraded my own phone. An iPhone SE from 2016, scratch screen, and a battery that barely lasted half a day. I never took a vacation. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't imagine being gone for 7 days without someone to drive Mom to pick up her meds, or change Dad's oil, or help Brian cram for another math exam. I kept telling myself, just a little longer and things would be okay. They'd be okay. I never asked, what about me? When friends asked why I still lived at home, still single, still working like I was racing a storm, I'd joke, I'm the eldest daughter. It's my destiny to keep the house from falling apart. People laughed, but I wasn't joking. I had traded the best years of my life to patch the cracks in a house I wasn't even sure I belonged in anymore. At first, I was the golden child. Mom praised me at church, Dad bragged about me to coworkers. But over time, the praise faded. No one thanked me when I paid the electric bill. No one said, "Thanks to you." They just asked, "What day are you sending the money this month?" Gratitude had quietly morphed into expectation. Quiet, constant, and relentless. I didn't see it clearly until one August afternoon, when Mom called me in the middle of a workday. She didn't ask how I was, she didn't ask if I was busy, she simply said, "Anna, don't forget to pay the home insurance today, it was due yesterday." That sentence landed like a command in my ear. That was when I realized I was no longer the beloved daughter, I had become a profit engine, greased by silent sacrifice. I still vividly remember that evening, right after I finished an online meeting with a partner in Chicago. The marketing campaign I had led had officially crossed the $1 million revenue mark in just 6 weeks. I set down my laptop and headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner for the family, like every other day. As I opened the fridge, my mom walked in. Arms crossed, looking me up and down. "You're almost 30, Anna," she said, her voice not loud but sharp like a blade. "Are you seriously not planning to have a man in your life?" I turned around, still holding the water bottle. "I'm focusing on my career," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I haven't met anyone who feels right yet." "Or maybe you're just too busy? Who wants to commit to someone who's always working and acts like a big shot boss all the time?" I forced a smile. I was a boss. At least a team lead. And I worked like that to keep this house from being foreclosed. But my mom didn't care about that. She only wanted to know when I'd bring home a husband, like her friend's daughter, who just got engaged last weekend. That night, I didn't eat with the family. I brought my food up to my room, eating while checking my bank balance. I had just paid the gas bill, the internet, and my dad's health insurance the previous week. All in all, I had spent nearly $2,400 this month on the family, not counting groceries or supplements for my mom. A week later, at the family's Thanksgiving gathering, I tried to share about a new project I was developing. An e-commerce platform for small businesses across the Midwest. I had just been praised by the CEO in front of the whole company. But before I could finish my sentence, my mom turned to Brian and said, "Tell your sister about the internship in Denver." Brian beamed and launched into a detailed story about the very open work culture and his outings with coworkers. I stayed silent, sipping my water. No one followed up on what I had been saying. Throughout dinner, I served food, cleared plates, made tea. Brian sat with his legs crossed, telling stories, while my dad repeatedly declared, "My youngest really has drive." When I gently reminded them that I had paid for Brian's flight and 3 months of rent in Denver, no one reacted. My mom just smiled, placed her hand on Brian's shoulder and said, "That's an investment in the future?" The following month, the family decided to replace all the living room furniture. I only found out when I saw the movers carrying in a new sofa. When I asked, "Did we talk about this beforehand?" my mom simply replied, "This is your parents' house. Do we need your permission every time we change something?" I bit my lip and said nothing. Still, the payment card used was mine. The charge showed up in my bank email the next morning. Payment approved, $3,720 to Midwest Furniture and Home. At some point, my input had become an annoyance. I wasn't sure when that shift happened. But more and more, I felt pushed to the sidelines. Anytime my mom made big decisions, like replacing the roof, remodeling the kitchen, or even applying for a supplementary credit card for my dad, I only found out after everything was finalized. But when payment was due, the reminder always came to me. When I suggested installing a new water filtration system for the house, because the old one was too dirty, my mom waved it off. "It's just water, no one's dying." But a week later, when Brian mentioned reverse osmosis filters, she nodded and said, "Yeah, That's probably worth trying. I was no longer seen as capable, but rather as bossy, too intense, rigid. Once, when I told my dad we should cut back on expensive dining out, he sighed. Here you go again. It's like living with an auditor. My mom mumbled, having to get permission from your own kid to spend money. What a joke. I began staying quiet more often, even though I still transferred money on time. I stopped sharing about work, stopped bringing up my achievements. Everything I once thought was worth being proud of now felt like evidence of arrogance or control. One Saturday afternoon, after transferring $1,800 to cover my mom's hospital debt, I walked into the living room to see Brian playing on a brand new gaming console, the kind that costs nearly $500. My mom smiled and said, "He needs to relax with all that school pressure." I asked casually, "Where did the money come from?" And she replied without flinching, "I borrowed from your card, you make plenty anyway." I looked at her, the woman who gave birth to me, who once cradled me in her arms when I had a high fever at age 3, and didn't recognize her anymore. In her eyes, I was no longer a daughter. I was a source of income, a tool for maintaining comfort, and any emotion, need, or opinion I had was just an obstacle to the convenience they had grown accustomed to. And I began to wonder, if I disappeared, would they even notice? Or just look for a replacement wallet? I didn't mean to eavesdrop, honestly, I didn't. That Monday night, with the rain quietly drizzling outside, I came home earlier than usual after a client meeting was suddenly canceled. I entered through the back door without turning on the kitchen lights, planning to change first before making dinner. But as I set my purse down, I heard my father's voice from the living room. "Lower than usual." "She can't keep living here like this," my dad said. "It suffocates me every time I walk in. It's like having a shadow watching over us constantly." "What are you talking about?" my mom replied, sounding a bit confused. "She's our daughter, Donald. She's helped us a lot." Helped? Think about it. How many times have we had to tiptoe around her just to avoid upsetting her? He went on. Every decision we make, we have to be careful not to displease our financially supportive daughter. Mom was silent for a moment, then sighed. "I know. I'm tired too. It feels like living in someone else's house while pretending to be in charge." "Exactly. This house belongs to her now," my dad said, followed by a dry laugh. "But I'm sick of the feeling of being indebted to my own daughter. She's not staying because she loves us, she's staying to be in control." I stood frozen, behind the kitchen wall. My fingers clenched the strap of my purse so tightly I went numb. For a moment I thought I was imagining things, but every word, every sentence they said landed like a blade between my shoulders. That night, I skipped dinner. I said nothing. I just went upstairs and sat on my bed until late, staring into the darkness outside the window, feeling like I was falling into a bottomless pit. When did my love and support become a burden to the people I called family? I spent the next 3 days writing down everything I needed to say. I didn't want to react emotionally. I wanted a calm, rational conversation. If everything fell apart, at least I'd know I did my part with integrity. On Friday evening after dinner, when everyone was in the living room watching TV, I stood in front of them and said, "We need to talk." My mom looked up from her magazine. My dad muted the TV without a word. Brian pulled out his earbuds with a visibly annoyed expression. I took a deep breath. "I know things have been tense around here lately," I began. "And I think it's time we talked honestly about what's really going on." "Here we go again," my dad muttered, crossing his arms. Still, I kept my tone steady. "I've supported this family financially for nearly a decade. I've never regretted it. But lately, I don't feel respected. Whenever I express my thoughts, I'm shut down like I'm interfering. But when it comes to money, I'm always the first one you call." "You chose to give money," my mom cut in. "No one asked you to. You did it on your own. And now you want recognition?" I looked at her. "I'm not asking for praise. I just want to be treated like a family member, not a walking wallet. Oh, for heaven's sake, Anna, my dad stood up. You think this house revolves around you? We fed you, gave you shelter, and now you're lecturing us? I'm just stating the truth, I said, trying to stay calm. I heard you both on Monday. The room froze. My mom paled. My father clenched his fists. I didn't mean to overhear, I continued, voice shaking slightly. But I heard every word. And it made me think. I stayed because I wanted to take care of my family. But if my presence makes you feel suffocated, I can leave. Then leave, Brian suddenly snapped. You think you're so special, always making people feel small? You live here like you own the place. Brian, I turned to him. Who do you think paid for your tuition, your apartment? Where do you think that money came from? You did it to control everyone, not out of love. Brian sneered. You just want to feel important. You don't know how to exist without being the center. I turned back to my parents. Neither of them said a word. No one stood up for me. That's enough, my dad said coldly. You're our daughter, but you've crossed a line. If you're hurt by us telling the truth, maybe you really should find somewhere else to live. Stop torturing us with your guilt trips. I looked at them. 3 people who had once been my whole world. Every sacrifice, every deferred dream had been for them. And now, I was just a burden in their eyes. Fine, I said, my voice quiet but firm. If that's what you want, I'll leave. Tomorrow? My mom asked, her tone indifferent. Right now, I replied, turning to head upstairs. Behind me, my father fired one last shot, like a bullet to the back. Don't come back. Don't expect us to need anything from you again. I didn't answer, I just walked. No shouting, no tears, but every step I took echoed with the sound of something quietly collapsing. I moved out of my parents' house at exactly midnight that night. No one saw me off. No one looked back. I closed the door so softly that no one knew I had vanished from their lives, just as they had wished. And for the first time, I didn't look back. I called Claire, my best friend from college, who had once told me to come live with her at least until you get your balance back. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Lake Nokomis area, just over a 10-minute drive from my office. She didn't ask much over the phone, just said, "Do you need the key or should I leave the door unlocked?" I chose to knock. When I arrived, Claire had already made hot cocoa and set up the guest bed. When she saw me dragging 2 suitcases and a document bag, she didn't ask, "What happened?" She just said one thing. "You finally chose yourself." The first week passed in a blur. I went to work like a machine. Still punctual, still turning in reports, still smiling at coworkers, but completely hollow inside. Every time I picked up my phone, I hoped for a message from Mom, or even a cold call from Dad. But the inbox remained empty. I missed home. Not the house itself, but the idea of where I thought I belonged. I missed the clinking of silverware at dinner, the scent of the laundry detergent Mom used, even the dim yellow light in the upstairs hallway. But deep down, I knew those things were no longer mine. Maybe they never truly were. The strange thing was, while my heart felt shattered, my wallet was full. After 3 weeks of not paying utility bills, medical expenses, tuition, or house maintenance, my account was untouched. I walked into Whole Foods without checking the sale column. I booked a long overdue skin exam at a private clinic for the first time in 6 years. I ate breakfast without opening my banking app or checking which bill was due next. Claire was the first to notice the shift. One night she walked into my room while I was sitting by the window, laptop shut, warm tea in hand. "When's the last time you just sat like this?" she asked. I smiled faintly, eyes still on the distant yellow lights reflecting off the lake. "Maybe. Since I was 20? You need to talk to someone, Anna," she said gently but firmly. "You've lived for other people for so long. Now it's time to understand why you let yourself endure all of that. I agreed, partly because she was right, partly because, for the first time in my life, I felt I had the right to choose. Even in healing. I found a therapist named Dr. Helen Monroe. Her office was on the 12th floor of an old building, flooded with light and eerie calm. During our third session, after I described how I'd lived, how I'd taken care of my family like it was my silent duty, she wrote 2 words on a notepad: parentification and emotional manipulation. Anna, she said evenly, you were placed in the role of an adult far too early. You were never allowed to be a child. You became the pillar when you were barely learning to stand. I sat frozen, unable to breathe. The scariest part, she continued, is that you were praised for it. And you confused that admiration with love. Every week, I met with Dr. Monroe. I started learning how to identify boundaries, something I once mistook for selfishness. I learned to tell the difference between genuine love and calculated dependency. I wrote down what I wanted, not just what I was supposed to do. And then, my work life changed too. Maybe because I wasn't running on fumes anymore. I began making decisions with real confidence, not just to prove my worth to my family. I proposed a completely new campaign strategy to a major client, and they approved it. My department head smiled at me during our routine meeting and said, "You seem lighter these days, Anna, brighter." Maybe it was because I had finally put down a burden I thought I could never unload. I also returned to playing piano, an old love I had abandoned because I didn't have time. I signed up for weekend yoga with Claire, started reading fiction again at night instead of hunched over my laptop till midnight. I bought a vintage-style desk lamp I'd always wanted but considered extravagant. For the first time, no one asked, "Why did you buy that?" Or, "Was it really necessary?" Freedom. Not the reckless kind, but the quiet, soft kind that lets you breathe deeply without guilt. I still haven't reached out to my family, they haven't called either. And, in that silence, I finally understood something. If I truly mattered, they would have looked for me for more than a missed bill. If the love was real, it wouldn't have vanished just because I stopped paying. I used to think I was abandoned. But now I know. They never really held on to me. 3 months and 12 days after I left home, my phone rang while I was waiting in line at the coffee shop below my office building. The name on the screen made me freeze. Mom. Karen. I didn't pick up. I let it ring until it stopped. 15 minutes later, it was Dad. "Donald." This time I answered. Partly out of curiosity, partly because I had already prepared for this moment. "Anna," he said, his voice rushed. "How have you been?" "I'm fine," I replied calmly. "Is something wrong?" He hesitated for a moment, then came straight to the point. "We just wanted to ask why there wasn't a transfer this month." I nearly laughed. No apology, no "we miss you," not even a "how are you doing?" Just 6 words that cut through every illusion. Why wasn't there a transfer? "Because I don't live there anymore," I said. "And because you made it very clear. Don't come back, don't send money, don't interfere." "Anna?" He lowered his voice, a bit awkwardly. That day, everyone was upset. Things were said in the heat of the moment. You know how that is. People lose control. "I know," I said, holding the cappuccino I had just received. "But the issue isn't what was said in anger. The issue is that you all genuinely wanted me gone." "That's not true," he argued weakly. "The house is in trouble. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank has sent warning letters." "What about the money I haven't been using for the past 3 months?" I asked. "I remember I used to pay over $1,800 each month. Where did that go?" He fell silent. I could hear a faint woman's voice in the background. "My mother." "Let me talk to her," she said, and then the phone was handed over. "Anna," my mother said in a tone so sweet, it sounded fake. "I've missed you so much. Since you left, the house has felt so empty. I thought maybe you needed time, so I didn't reach out." I took a deep breath. "Did you call because you missed me, or because the house is about to be foreclosed?" Her tone changed instantly. "Anna, that's not fair. Your father and I didn't want to call, but circumstances forced us. We're family. You can't just watch us struggle and do nothing." I stayed quiet for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. "The family you're talking about, is that the same one who told me to get out and never come back? The one who called me selfish, controlling, a leech? Even though I paid for everything?" "That was said in the heat of the moment," she replied, her voice rising. "Everyone was tired, under pressure. You're not exactly a saint either." "I've never claimed to be a saint," I said. "But I was the one carrying the whole family, for nearly a decade, without asking for anything in return. And yet, you all cast me out like I was a burden." "You're exaggerating," she snapped. "If you don't help, we'll lose everything. Lucas is in his final year. He can't relocate now." I chuckled softly. Lucas. Of course, always the top priority, even when he's living off someone else's money. And no one says a word. "Anna, you're the older sibling, you should understand. Sometimes adults need help. That's what family is for." "No," I said, my voice firm. "Family is about respect, not exploitation." I could hear her breathing hard on the other end. "Do you really want to see the whole family go bankrupt?" "No, Mom," I said gently. "I just don't want to keep living as if love is a financial agreement." "So you won't help?" she asked, nearly hissing. "No," I replied. "I won't send money. I won't come back. And if this family ever needs support, it better start with a sincere apology, not an unpaid bill." She stayed silent, then hung up without another word. I stood on the sidewalk, the cold wind brushing against my collar, and yet I felt completely calm. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I just saw everything more clearly than ever. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was the one who paid the bills. When I was useful, they kept me around. When I wasn't, they called it independence. And now that I dared to live for myself, they called me heartless. But I knew the truth. I was simply doing what they never taught me, protecting myself. I didn't receive any more calls after that day. No messages, no emails, no handwritten letters. The silence stretched on so deep it felt like they had erased me from their lives. Or at least, were punishing me by pretending to. I didn't fight it. I didn't text back either. I deleted my parents' numbers, closed the old bank account I used to pay family bills, and cut off all contact. For the first time in nearly 10 years, I was living just for myself. With no strings. No invisible debts. 6 months passed faster than I expected. That March, I was promoted to strategy team lead at work. The new salary let me move out of the shared room with Claire into a one-bedroom apartment on the 9th floor of a lakeside building near Lake Harriet. It wasn't huge, but it had floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the water, and a balcony that caught the morning sun. I picked out every piece of furniture, every paint color. No more wondering if Mom would like it, or Brian might need the extra space. I started dating a former coworker named Nathan. The one who once told me I had the eyes of someone who's been through war but still kept her softness. We weren't in a rush. He understood I needed time to believe in a relationship that didn't come with strings. I told him straight up, "I'm not taking care of anyone anymore." He laughed and said, "I know how to pay for my own coffee." In June, I booked a ticket to Florence, Italy. A trip I'd dreamed of since college but never dared to take. I went alone. No rigid itinerary, no pressure to get the perfect shot. I wandered slowly through cobblestone streets, listened to church bells in the early morning, and ate pistachio gelato by the Arno River like it was a reward for all the years I forgot who I was. When I came back to Minneapolis, tanned and toting a suitcase full of Italian linen, I found a letter in my mailbox from the bank that held my parents' mortgage. Curious, I opened it. It was an official notice. The property at 1657 Morrison Drive had been foreclosed. The house I grew up in, the one I paid nearly 2 years of mortgage for, was no longer theirs. I didn't feel sad, just empty. Not because they lost the house, but because they never once called again, not even to say, "We were wrong." A week later, I ran into my cousin Melanie at a business seminar downtown. She didn't beat around the bush. "Heard your folks are renting a 2-bedroom near the tech college," she said, not unkindly. "Lucas moved back and is doing community college. Uncle Donald's out of work. Aunt Karen's working again, but it's just part-time." I nodded. "You telling me this so I'll feel guilty?" "No," Melanie said, meeting my eyes. "I just think you finally did the right thing." We stood in silence a while. Then she added, "You know, back in the day, the whole family thought you were the spoiled one. Smart, sure, but still, the girl living off her parents. After everything that happened, they finally realized you were the one carrying the whole household and no one even saw it." I didn't respond, but as I walked out of the conference hall that afternoon, I felt an odd sense of peace. Like the truth had finally found its place. I kept living my own life. I enrolled in a weekend visual arts class. I went to a craft fair in Portland with Nathan. I applied to the part-time MBA program at the University of Minnesota. For the first time, not to earn more money for the family, but to grow myself. Sometimes, when I pass by the old house, now painted a new color with different people living inside, I don't get teary anymore. I just think, I lived, I loved, I sacrificed there. But that's not home anymore. Home now is where I'm respected. I don't know if my parents ever understood. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But I know one thing for sure. If they truly loved me the way they used to say, they wouldn't have needed a financial reason to keep me around. I used to think love meant endurance. Now I know. Love, for yourself or for someone else, should never come at the cost of your own destruction. And sometimes, the greatest act of love you can offer is walking away, so both sides get the chance to grow up. Each in their own time, in their own way. Anna's story is a powerful reminder that kindness should never become an unconditional obligation just because of the word family. When familial bonds are exploited like a walking credit card, walking away isn't betrayal, it's a brave act of self-worth. In real life, if you're being drained by one-sided sacrifice, remember this. Love should never cost you your identity. You have the right to set boundaries and live a life you truly own. What do you think of Anna's choice? Was she too decisive, or did she fully deserve her new beginning? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and life.